Welcome to Independent Thought and Freedom, Episode 4. My guest today is the venerable Farrukh Dhondy, the British-Parsi writer with a vast output of short stories, children's fiction, plays, novels, TV series, and films, and as Wikipedia describes him, a left-wing political activist. Farrukh Dhondy was born in India, in Pune, and went to school and college there. He got a scholarship to Cambridge, UK, when he was 19 and studied natural sciences, specializing in advanced physics. Then he switched to studying English, and after a year of doing odd jobs in London, got a scholarship to Leicester University to write a thesis on Rudyard Kipling. He's done all sorts of odd jobs in London and Leicester, and did 9 years of teaching in London secondary schools. Throughout his university and working careers, he was a member of radical immigrant organizations, including the Indian Workers' Association, the British Black Panther movement, and the radical magazine and platform Race Today. He has written perhaps 20 books of fiction, several books of non-fiction, including the biography of CLR James, stage plays, TV series and films, including some for Bollywood, including the historical blockbuster Mangal Pandey, starring Amir Khan and Toby Stephens. He worked as a commissioning editor for Channel 4 TV in Britain for 14 years, and is now the commissioning consultant for an Indian content platform, a sort of Indian Netflix. He lives in London and travels to Mumbai a few weeks a year. It is my honor to welcome to this podcast, Farrukh Dhondy. Welcome.
Thanks, Kirk.
Great to have you here. I want to express my admiration for your very interesting life and career, which is being recognized by your peers through your many awards and honors. But I'm also intrigued that you're perhaps maybe the only other person in the world who shares on the same level with me a twin obsession with both CLR James and VS Naipaul, two Trinidadians who became global giants in the post-colonial world.
Absolutely.
Yeah, tell me about that.
I met VS Naipaul, and a long time ago, 30, 40 years ago, and he didn't want to know me. He thought I was a left-wing activist and not the kind of person that he appreciated at all. But then I was working at Channel 4, and his new wife, Nadira, said to his agent, "I'd like to meet Farrukh Dhondy. I read his books, I read his columns," right? And so the agent phoned me up and said, "Can you come to lunch? Vidya wants to have lunch with you." And I said, "Vidya doesn't like me. He thinks I'm a socialist dog."
What year was this then?
This was 1997.
Okay.
I had known him for 10, 15 years before that. I'd interviewed him for television, for a book program. I'd spoken on several platforms with him. And I remember one occasion at Warwick University when he told a friend of mine, that boy Dhondy doesn't mean anything he says, does he?" And I went along to this lunch. I said, "Okay."
Wait. Before we go, was he right?
What?
When he said that boy Dhondy doesn't mean a thing he said.
Doesn't mean, of course not. I meant what I said, but he didn't like what I meant.
Right.
That's what it was. Yeah, he was very conservative in his thinking, in a political way also. And anything that touched on socialism or communism or whatnot, he was extremely suspicious of. I don't quite know why. I've never figured that out. But I went to this lunch at a very posh restaurant in London. They called it the Bibendum, where people eat oysters and stuff. And at first he was very sullen, even though Lady Naipaul was falling all over me, and saying, "Oh, love your books, love your columns, blah, 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 read this, I read that, tell us how that came about blue." And then I said, "Look, I've got to go. very soon. Yeah, I'm off to New York. So this is what you do. I said, well, I travel around because of my job, as a commissioning editor. And I told the story. Of I'd just been to Jamaica. And Vidya picked up his ears. He wanted to know what I'd done there. I said, we were shooting a program at hospital at the, it was called Jamaica, Emergency Jamaica, and Jamaica and E, because we wanted to see, follow the stories of doctors in the department of Central Kingston Hospital. And one day we were walking through one of the final days of shooting this documentary series when a guard, a security guard in uniform, a tall black man sitting at the gate said, are you the crew? Are you the television crew? We said, yeah. And he said, okay, hold on. You've got to take me. I said, take what? He said, film me. I'm the Nat King Cole of Jamaica. He stood up and started singing. And he sang, Mona Lisa, do you love me, or something. And suddenly, gunshots rang out just outside the hospital. Yes. Bang, 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 bang,
Yes,
and we started ducking for cover and took the cameras away. He said, don't mind them boys. And he continued singing Mona Lisa. And I said, for God's sake, concentrate on the camera and the gunshots. Let's have this. And, as we walked in, two guys were dragged in, bleeding like hell. Right. They were the victims of the gunshots. They were being carried by their friends into the hospital. I said, we've got to start. We have to start the series with this fellow asking us to sing, asking us to film him singing Mona Lisa because he was the Nat King Cole of Jamaica. So we did start that. I related this story to Naipaul, and he laughed his head off. Yeah, and from that moment, we've never looked back, right? He kind of adopted me as a confidant.
That's brilliant.
I used to regularly go to his house. And
yes.
Yeah.
I think once you could
to the last.
Once you could appreciate that sort of absurdity, that West Indian absurdity, like we live in a surreal world here, that, and I think people never really appreciated that about Naipaul. That
I know.
Even in his biggest work, it is full of surreal humor.
Yep, I thought the best line was, don't mind them boys.
Yes, exactly.
Obviously, Vidya thought that was funny.
It absolutely is. I mean, that's very interesting. I find it intriguing. The whole present, and it's very different with the United States, for example. The West Indian presence in Britain, obviously, because of the colonial past, gives people like you, from India, who may not have such a close connection, but through Britain, you worked with Stuart Hall, Darcus Howe, and all Trevor Phillips.
Darcus, a very, very close friend of mine.
Yes, yeah. Yeah. I imagine, is that how you met CLR James, through Darcus Howe?
Yes. Right. What happened was, I was in Race Today, the magazine that Darcus ran, and one day Darcus calls me. Well, I'd met CLR James before in the Black Panther movement. He turned up, right? In fact, it's an illustrious story about CLR. We used to run a magazine, Panther movement, called Freedom News, and it was full of kind of rhetoric and Leninist lessons and bits of English.
About what years was this?
This was in the early 70s.
Early 70s. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
And
James
one day
finished his Trinidad party by then.
Yes. He was back in Britain and living in Wisden. And one day he was brought by Darcus, I think, to one of our meetings, and they were because he was going to be there. There were 200 people crammed into a little hall, and he waved his at us and said, who writes this? So people said, we all do, this is the editor, Farrukh is on the editorial committee and so on. And he said, why do you write all this rubbish? So I said, what do you mean? And he said, oh, this is stuff. Why don't you write about who you are, what you're doing? You'll attract the public in that way. So we said, like how? And he gave us a lesson. He said, what do you do? And a guy said, I'm a bus conductor. And he said, well, where do you work? He said, in the garage. He said, what happens to you? What do the passengers say to you? What do other drivers and conductors say to you? How is the union treating you? Blah, blah, right? And so he moved on to one or two. I'm a nurse, I'm unemployed. And he said, write about being unemployed, write about, do you go to collect welfare? What do you do? And we were just considering this. He said, what do you do? And I said, I'm a school teacher. And he said, well, write about what happens in school. And we considered that. And we said, that's what we should do. So the next time I wrote a kind of 700-word story about the fifth form disco. Kids had a disco and black boys from Brighton broke in at about 9 o'clock and bust up the party because somebody's girlfriend was going with somebody else and blah, blah, some jealousy. Yeah. So they closed the disco down. I wrote that as a short story. Yeah. Mm-hmm. In Freedom News, it began to sell. I wrote several other, incidents that happened in school. Somebody stole a pen, somebody put a bench at the art teacher, there's all sorts of stuff. And one day a guy comes to me in the staff room and says, are you Farrukh Dhondy? And I said, does he owe you money? And no. And I said, are you from the police? And he said, no, I'm from the publishers. I'm from Macmillan's. And I read your short stories. I said, but how do you know they're mine? They're anonymous. He said, well, there can't be very many Farrukh Dhondys in the London Education Authority. And I asked the guy who sells me the paper at Oval Station, who writes these. And I've come because, there's an audience for multicultural books, but there aren't any multicultural books. I want you to write one. Can I use your stories? I said, well, don't use those stories. You're looking at the Hemingway of India, So I'll write you some fresh ones. So he said, okay, here's a contract. He pulled a contract out of his pocket and he gave me £200, on signature, which was fantastic. I'd never seen, I'd never seen 10 single parts gathered together. And having signed this, it was fine. I wrote him my first book. And that's how CLR led me into a piece of good luck, into publishing.
That's amazing. That's an amazing story. Yeah,
and it didn't stop. Once you've written one book, they say, how about the next one? And how about the third one? Blah, blah.
Wow. That's an amazing, because, and also with CLR James himself, I mean, since the 50s, if you know, in the States, when he was having his debates with all the different Marxist organizations, and he was talking about the importance of the newspaper and the writing of the everyday life, and his first novel was like, this is fantastic. I didn't know that story at all.
And then what happened was his Darkus comes to me and says, listen, CLR is having some tension in his household. So I said, what sort of tension? He said, well, Selma, his wife, has a feminist collective there, and they want him at the age of 80 to do this, that, and the other. And he's not ready to do that. And can he move out? And I said, well, if he wants to move out, he moves out. He said, you've got a spare room. Can he stay here for a few days? So I said, absolutely. So I went in my car, picked him up, brought him, put him in the spare bedroom in my flat in London. He didn't stay 2 days, he stayed 6 months, right? And we had a good time, except he would be very particular. He'd be very particular. He'd say, Farrukh, make me that 3-minute egg, And if it was a 3.5-minute boiled egg, he'd say, this egg is wrong,
Yes, he had very particular taste for a Marxist, didn't he?
Yeah, and then he'd ask to go to restaurants. He'd say, Farrukh, who's a Chinese restaurant for us? Let's go tonight. And we'd get on the stairs, he'd get in the car, four of us, and we go off to a Chinese restaurant or whatever. And he loved his food. He loved doing this, that, and the other with food. And then one day he says to me, look, I'm going to cook the curry, right? So I said, fine. There are 3 or 4 people turning up.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, okay, now get some meat. I said, okay. Then he said, get some curry. I said, what do you mean by curry?
Yes.
Because being Indian, I know how to cook curry with cumin and coriander. And
Yes.
he didn't know what he was talking about. He said, just get some curry and put it in the meat, man. And then when we ate the curry that I had cooked, right, together, people said, oh, it's delicious. And he said, I'm not only a great philosopher, I'm also a great chef. That was him. That was him.
Yes, brilliant stuff. So so that's amazing. So James is so, central for you to embark on this writing career. And what I find very interesting about your career is that you, Naipaul, I would say perhaps A.R. Rahman, Shekhar Kapur. I've sort of looked at you over the years as these remarkable people working at the highest levels in England, in Britain, and in India, in the highest levels of film and arts. And I don't think that's
Kirk,
at all.
I've never thought of it like that.
but it's a fascinating and important thing. I mean, because let's say like Shekhar Kapur, for example, getting an Oscar and on the West End, and then doing these films, and you Channel 4, you're commissioning editor, you're writing TV series, and then you're writing Bollywood blockbusters. I
Yes.
think one thing is just as a personal story. I mean, how did that happen for you? And then I'd want to talk about the general phenomenon. But I mean, so for you crossing these highest lines,
Kirk, it's absolutely a matter of good luck, of being at the right place at the right time. This guy came to me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he says, Martin Pick, he was called. He was the editor of Macmillan. And he said one book follows another, then another, then another. And so I was writing these books. And then another guy comes to me and says, can I turn your books into stage plays? So I said, no, I'll write an original stage play for you. So I wrote a reggae musical called Mama Dragon. And that was performed in a community center, which is where the Black Theatre Cooperative operated. And then some guy from the West End came and said, I'd like to transfer this to the Arts Theatre in the West End, mm-hmm. and to the Institute of Contemporary Arts. And so the play moved from place to place, went abroad, went to Amsterdam and Germany and all this. And then, of course, having written one play, some guy, the guys asked me to write another one and another one. So by the time I had written 3 stage plays, some television guy came up to us and said, look, can you transform, can you write us a situation comedy involving Black people? So me and the other writer of the Black Theatre Co-op, Mustafa Mathura, also a Trinidadian, said, yeah, we'll do it. So we ran a workshop in which they came up with ideas. After 2 weeks, we had the best idea, and we called it The Hills Are Alive, about a young people's family in Willesden, in London. And we didn't like the title. And we went to, as it was being prepared, the guy said, look, I'm going to advertise this. But we were shooting it at London Weekend Television. And then he says, you better come up with a title by this afternoon. We said, no problem. He said, that's it. Call it No Problem. Right? So we called this series No Problem. It went into 1, 2, 3 series. And because I've been writing that, the commissioning editor at Channel 4, my predecessor, says to me, can you write an Asian series for us? So I said, okay. So I set off to think about it, and I wrote a series called Tandoori Nights, which was very successful again, for Channel 4.
Yes.
And I was earning money, I was writing for the BBC, commissioned me to write a series, somebody commissioned me to write a film. I was doing all that out of this experience, from Freedom News articles to writing books, to being invited to do plays.
And so how did you get to do the Mangal Pandey and the Bollywood stuff?
It'll come to that, because what happened was, I was earning a lot of money from writing when the head of Channel 4 calls me and his secretary and says, Jeremy would like to have lunch with you at the Ivy. Now, the Ivy is a big house restaurant, where rich people eat, and I didn't go there. But I said, okay, yeah, great. Then I thought, why is he calling me? He can't like my writing that much. So I turned up at the restaurant, and he said, what are you drinking? And I said, I'll have a glass of red wine. And he's called for the menu and ordered an 84-pound bottle of claret. And at that time, in 1983, I thought, wow, what's he doing, Why is he ordering me an 84 bottle of claret? And we drank at a good time. And he said, now I want to get out of business. You know that your predecessor, another Trinidadian, is leaving, right? Because she's now Lady Hollick. And she was called Sue Woodford.
Okay.
She was Trinidadian Judge Woodford's daughter. And she was the first commissioning editor for multicultural program Channel 4. And she was a friend of mine. She'd commissioned all these things from me. And he said, she's leaving. She's going to America. And I said, yes, I hope her successor likes my work. And he said, that may not be necessary. So I said, why not? So he said, because we want you to do the job. So I said, you're offering me a 9-to-5 job? He said, nobody works 9 to 5. We work 12 to 12, And I said, but Jeremy, I write a lot of television. I'm earning a lot of money. Why would I take an office job? He said, you write a lot, but that could dry up, you realize? In other words, take my job, otherwise you won't write again. So I said, okay, think about it. By the time January came around and the applications were in, he called me up personally and said, look, I haven't got your application. Again, I went to CLR James, right? Friend of mine. By that time, he moved out of my house and moved into Race Today's quarters upstairs. He had a flat
in the 70s,
above the offices. Yeah. So I went to, this was 83. So I went to Nello and said, I've been off. He said, what's going on? And I said, I've just been offered this job. And he pointed to a book and shook his finger like that,
Yes.
And then he pointed to the television and said, that's it, right? He didn't say it. He just pointed to the television.
Yes.
But he was take the fucking job, right?
Yes,
So,
that's right.
So having heard that from him, I thought, this guy knows what he's talking about. That's the future, let's do it. So yes, I said to Jeremy, I'll take the job, and I became commissioning editor at Channel 4. From that, I hired Shekhar Kapoor, who was, mediocre, or a medium level, not mediocre at all, medium level director in Bollywood.
Right.
And I bought a couple of his films to put on Channel 4. And somebody came and told me that he'd be a perfect talk show host. So I started an Asian talk show called On the Other Hand, right? Which discussed controversial subjects from the Asian background, like our Asian boys, mama's boys, right? Or gay Asians, what does the family think of them, right? Honor killings, what happens there? And so he was the host, the compere of this program. And one day I had a script from my ex-wife, not a script, my ex-wife Mala Sen, my late ex-wife. She
Right.
died a few years ago. She'd written a book called Bandit Queen, right?
Right.
Which was
Yes.
about Fulan Devi, a bandit in India.
Yes.
And it was, uh, she had this book, and we said, let's turn it into a film. And because it was a great story. And she tried to write a script, but of course she wasn't a script writer, so she didn't know how to do that. She'd written the prose book, very good. So my chief at Channel 4 had allocated me £1 million to make this film. And I didn't have a script, I didn't have a director, I didn't have a producer, but I told a friend of mine, Bobby Bailey, who'd done some other things for me, can you be the producer of this? You know India well. He said, yeah, who's going to direct it? I said, well, this evening we'll tackle Shekhar Kapoor, right?
Yes.
And we went to a pub after the chat show that he was hosting, and I bought the beers, and I said, look, I've got this film that it has to be accepted by tomorrow, right? I've got to go and tell Michael Grade, my boss, that we are doing this, and this is the director, and the script is done. And he said, is the script done? And I said, no, it isn't. It hasn't even started. But will you say yes to it? You know the story. And he said, no, unless I see the script, I can't agree, and so on. So I said, look, by the time I finish this beer, you say yes or no, right? And if you say no, I'll go to somebody else. I'd have a shortlist in mind. And by the time I finished the beer, it was getting down to half an inch. He said, yes, I'll do it, right? And
So let me just ask you a question. So had Shekhar Kapoor migrated to Britain at that point, or was he traveling between the two countries? Or
he was just traveling. He was traveling just to do my show.
Okay.
He had no roots in Britain at all.
So you hiring him?
Yes.
That was so he had been living in India, but you wanted to bring him across.
Yeah.
Okay.
We brought him across to each of the shows. He did the season, and then he went back. But with Bandit Queen, he went back to Bombay, and we went to France for a fortnight, and I finished the script in a fortnight. Yeah.
Right. I mean, this is very important because this phenomenon that I've been observing of these Indians working at the highest level in Britain and India. I mean, you are like the linchpin. You are the person responsible because you brought Shekhar Kapoor. So what made? I mean, was that common? Like to take people from other countries and bring them in to do work in British TV?
We wanted it wasn't conscious in that sense. There was a chat show. We needed a host for the chat show. He was quite famous. We thought, this would bring in the audience, and it did. And so one thing led to another.
Yes,
and
yes.
We made Bandit Queen. Then he came here, and because people saw Bandit Queen, they asked him to make Elizabeth. Yeah. And that was one for which the film had Oscar.
Were you involved in the process of Elizabeth at all?
No, not at all. Nothing to do with it.
Right,
it was working title, and they kidnapped Shekhar Kapoor from us. And
because that is a
direction.
Yeah, it's quite a leap because Elizabeth being seen as this very British type of thing and being directed by an Indian, a Bollywood director of all things.
They thought he'd be very, very good at it because they'd seen Bandit Queen. They said quality of direction, let's get on with it. So they talked to him, and somebody had written the script. He read the script and said, yeah. So he went that way.
Was that the first crossover of a Bollywood director to a Western film? I think so.
Probably one of the first. I mean, there were Indian directors before. There was Baris Hussain and so forth, but they hadn't done Bollywood.
That's right.
This was the first Bollywood wala to go.
Because it's almost two different mentalities in the type of film.
Totally, because Bollywood comes from mythology.
That's right.
Bollywood comes from from the Ramayana and the Mahabharata and the epics.
It's a Leela.
And even though they are in modern settings, the good and bad and the gods and the villains and the demons, they're all the same.
That's right. It's a tragedy. It's the ups, it's the downs, it's the crying, it's the laughing. It's the birth story and death story.
Western film comes from observation. It comes from novels. It comes from how life is lived rather than from mythology.
Absolutely.
Two different traditions.
And persons like yourself, like Shekhar Kapur, have been able to navigate these traditions and reach the highest levels in both these traditions. I just find that.
Don't know about that. Okay. I really don't know about that. But one does what comes one's way, really.
Yes, but what I find fascinating, I don't think that happens in any other two cultures in that way. Two cultures that that have their own traditions, their own forms, their own their own icons, all of that. And then for a single individual or a group of small individuals to be able to go back and forth at will between the two, it's a remarkable thing.
We were colonials, and we grew up with English literature. We grew up by we being groomed in Catholic and Anglican schools. We had our own religions at home and our Christian religion in school. We saw movies from the West in English mostly, and we saw Hindi movies and had stars, and we were fans of both. Raj Kapoor as well as Clint Eastwood. So who can say? We lived between those, and I never felt alienated. Lots of people made a big thing about feeling alienated between one culture and another, feeling foreign in England and this and that, and I've never felt that in the least.
Yeah, and this
must between the two as though it's natural to me.
Exactly. This must be sort of related to your political views in some way, wouldn't you say? In the idea of boundaries, multiculturalism, globalization, nationalism.
Yes,
this has to be related to that somehow.
Well, in India, I don't see how one can not be a socialist. I grew up with, I grew up with poverty around me. In the 50s. You can imagine, we had a fairly comfortable, I lived with my aunts, lower middle class working girls, maiden aunts, and my grandfather, and we had a cook, and the cook would bring in okra, bindi.
Yes.
Ladies' fingers. From the market. He'd bring a big bag of them, and he'd be followed by a couple of urchins. And I said, "What are these urchins following you? What is he standing at the gate for?" He said, "Well, when I top and tail the okra, they want the top and tailed bits. Instead of throwing them in the bin, they want to cook them." Right? And they've come begging for those.
Yes.
So I said, "What are you going to do?" And he said, "I'm going to cut larger bits off because your aunts won't notice, and hand them to them so they can eat the okra." So one was surrounded, and then you began to connect. You began to connect religious superstition, idiotic beliefs with that kind of poverty. You said, there's this one thing is probably definitely related to the other. The poverty, the suffering is related to the idea that there is an afterlife and, you can suffer here, but you'll be okay later or something. Or that karma, that you're born blind because you did something wrong in your last life. It's all nonsense. It's all bollocks.
Now your career as an artist, let's say, right?
Yeah.
Paul Buell's biography of James called The Artist is Revolutionary, right?
Yeah.
I believe you'd be aware of that. And yourself, so James was both an artist and revolutionary. Would you consider yourself in that mold?
Absolutely not. I consider myself as somebody who earns their money by writing. That's why I do it. obviously, you get into a trance and you try and create something that fits into a greater tradition and that's acceptable, that's, critically decent. Uh, you don't just write for, I'm not writing 50 Shades of Grey.
Right.
I never will. Yeah. But, and I write what I like. I write what I feel like.
Yes.
And
That's
recently,
Orwell, isn't it? I write what I like. Is it?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
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 I mean,
Ian Foster said, I write to win the respect of other people I respect.
That's correct. That's correct.
That's good too.
Well, I mean, one thing about, when I talk about the artist as revolutionary, one thing that I love about James and Orwell, now that his name is that, and what made their politics so, and the political theorizing so, you could say idiosyncratic or revolutionary but what I mean is real and different, is that they were novelists. So just as you said how James inspired you to, and your collective to, you're a bus driver, what do people say to you? It's like looking by looking at the world with a novelist's eye, but having this sort of political commitments that you have, it changes everything rather than the sort of formulaic drivel that you...
Yeah, absolutely. He said, James was telling us at that meeting that by writing your own experience, you will win friends and influence people. And that's the way to build a political movement rather than talk rhetoric. And, rather than debate whether Trotsky was right or whether he contributed to a degenerate worker state or...
Yes. That, and did he use those words, win friends and influence people?
Sorry?
Did James use those words, win friends and influence people?
No, he didn't. No. I just picked them out of the air because on our shelves in India, my aunts had that book.
Exactly. I would have been very surprised if he did use it. That would have been a great insight that I never knew.
No, he said a lot of important things, right? I mean, things which would startle people.
Yes.
I'll tell you some of the mischievous things he used to say, right? 3 people turned up from, when I was there in the room, 3 people from America turned up and they started talking to him about slavery. And at a break in the conversation, he said to them, look, it was all very sad and I have shed my tears. I've shed my tears about slavery. But do you know what the most important thing about slavery was? And they all looked startled. And he said, it forced the Europeans to build bigger ships. And that was completely mischievous, Yes. These were passionate people, and they felt a lot about the past history and so on. And this is what he was saying to them.
Very Naipaullian, isn't it?
Yeah. He said, now, this is what CLR said. It forced the Europeans to build bigger ships to accommodate slave trade. And when they left in disgust, I asked him why he said that. He said, well, they have to learn. And I tell you what happened.
Yes.
The Grenadians, the revolutionaries, Maurice Bishop.
Yes.
And his... Were
you close to them?
Well, I vaguely knew Maurice Bishop when he was in Britain. Then when he went off, I did know Bernard Cord, who murdered him, who murdered Maurice, right? And Jackie Kraft. Yeah. I knew them well. I knew Bernard well because he was a school teacher in the same sort of radical groups of teaching as I was. And of course, he went off and did all this stuff. Yeah. So when they had taken over Grenada, they'd taken over the government of Grenada, 3 of them turned up. Maurice Bishop, Jackie Kraft, and somebody else who I probably don't identify. As before they came, CLR says to me, Farrukh, where is that claret, that the red wine? I said, we finished it yesterday, boss. And he said, well, guests are coming. What are you doing? And I said, you mean go and get some more? He said, of course. So I went off to you can't get decent claret in Brixton. So I went down a little way and got some, and brought a few bottles up, and we had a drink in that. And he told them, and I remember this so clearly, he says to them, listen, stop all this talk about socialism. You can't have nutmeg socialism. Yeah. Because Grenada grows down there, and you can't have nutmeg socialism. So Morris said, okay, so what do we do? He said, give the people good government. And Morris said, what do you mean? And he said, well, you got a lot of fishermen. They have a lot of fish. I know from my own experience that the fishermen of our islands have a big catch. Half of it goes rotten and has to be thrown away. Yeah? Or fed to the cats or whatever. Then why did you give them a refrigeration plant? Call them together and say, what do you want? And inevitably they'll say, we want a refrigeration plant.
Yes.
So give them a refrigeration plant, right? Then they can refrigerate the fish and sell it to Miami.
Yes.
They were absorbing all this. And he went on to tell them, there's this kind of thing and that kind of thing, and just give them good government and talk about socialism later. Yeah. And they all absorbed this. And as they left, he said behind them, and don't kill any nuns.
Yeah, these things, as a Trinidadian myself, I just recognize these things as so typically Trinidadian.
You got that, yeah.
I mean, it is, and it's interesting in your telling of these stories, how many Trinidadians you've come across in your life. I mean, and then and then you wrote CLR James, a biography of James, and you became sort of CLR VS Naipaul. You interviewed him for the Jaipur festival, and you became famous for your friendship with Naipaul in some ways. Had to defend him on Indian TV and all sorts of things. All the way. But what is your view of Trinidad in the global scheme of things? I think it's an interesting perspective from London.
See what CLR James said. There were a lot of people at the time in the 70s saying, back to Africa, do this, do that. And he said to me, he said, I don't mind who goes back to Africa, right? Let them go if they want to go. But we are part, Trinidad and the West Indies and the descendants of slaves in America are part of the Western intellectual tradition. Very important phrase.
Yes, absolutely.
We are part of the Western intellectual tradition.
Remember the whole debate?
We are now the descendants of Shakespeare and Newton, and Plato. That's where we have been acclimatized to. What else are we going to do? That's who we are now.
Yes. And
that was extremely important as a statement. I knew a lot of Trinidadians, important ones, like Darkus and CLR and VS Naipaul, right? And a few others. And I went to Trinidad a few times, right?
Yes.
To shoot films, to live with Stafford, our Darkus's brother. And I stayed there, a few weeks. I stayed, you may not believe, I stayed in East Dry River.
Okay. Were you there when Darkus did his documentary, The Gathering Storm?
Yeah.
Okay, so you were part of it.
I lived in Laventille.
Right.
In a shack, with Darkus's half-brother, Dadin. And he had one bed in a little room, the lavatory was outside, and he said, look, you sleep here, I'm going to sleep with my girlfriend down the road.
Right.
And so in this alley, and you know where Laventille is, it's a slum, it's a shanty. I was living in the shanty for a few days. And I looked around, I went all over Trinidad. Once, twice, 3 times. So I got acquainted with the place, loved it.
Yes.
Limed.
Yes,
with
pick up the jargon. Very good. Yeah,
Living with the
well, because I mean, I'm not asking only because of the sort of national island pride
yeah,
or whatever, but
yeah, yeah,
there's
yeah,
a
yeah.
very interesting thing about you know what the Marxists called the law of uneven development, right?
Yep,
Basically that averages mean nothing. So like if a country is growing at 4.5% the GDP, it's not everywhere is
yeah.
growing at 4.5%. Some places are growing much faster, some places are growing much slower,
Indeed,
and it's
indeed. Look at India. Yeah,
yeah, and so it's very so in India or China and so forth, the averages mean nothing. And
some very
what
rich,
is
some very poor. Yeah,
that's right. So it's interesting to look at the lumpiness of the way the world develops. Why? And I don't think it's only true with economics. I think it's true in so many things. Like let's say culturally, I always found it fascinating. Like let's say Lata Mangeshkar, right?
yes,
The iconic voice of India and all the
yes.
singing all these songs, and then the second sort of most revered singer and most talented or respected is her sister. I mean,
Asha Bhosle, yeah.
yeah, Asha Bhosle. I mean, in a country of a billion people, it wasn't always a billion in the 50s or 60s,
A
but
billion people, yes.
yeah, yes, so two sisters. I mean, come on. Yeah, I mean, isn't it so? It just shows. The lumpiness, you can say, oh, that's nepotism or whatever. I don't think it's that. There is
No.
something about talent or something being clustered, all sorts of things being clustered. There
You're
are
right.
yeah,
They were oozing talent. And see, what happened in after 1947 is that um, Gandhi and Nehru and people worked towards our independence, and we got it, right? India got its independence. What they had not defined is who Indians were.
yeah,
And the cinema, being trans-Indian from Kashmir to Colombo,
yes,
it became the lingua franca. It became the way people talk to each other, the medium of film, and that needed at some point to stop telling stories of the past and start defining who Indians were, and they did it in a mythological fashion,
yes,
like Raj Kapoor.
hmm
Raj Kapoor started the very, very important tradition in India of saying that we are people with clean hearts. We are
yes,
we are the salt of the earth. We come from the villages. We don't like city slickers. City slickers are the scum. They're the villains. Me, the peasant hero. Me, the petty thief, who is
that's
in fact forced to do this. With a sense of humor.
that's right.
And he sold these movies to define who Indians were.
hmm
And then he had a fight with his mistress, who left, and then she began to define who Indian women were with the film like Mother India.
hmm
I sacrifice, I'll sacrifice my love for my son for the truth, because the
Yes.
truth is bigger than human relationships, and so on. It's a kind of, not that anybody does, but it's a kind of ideal towards which to work.
hmm
So that's where these stars were born. And Lata Mangeshkar, I mean, absolutely, her voice is, to me, absolutely dripping with sex. You
Yes,
know,
yes, yes. I mean, it's so sensual.
I
It's
mean,
amazing.
it's just exactly right.
Yeah.
Her sister is more noisy, and so
hmm
people think, oh, that's sexy, dum 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 dum. But
Yeah.
that's not sexy. Sexy is the implications, the subtext of Lata Mangeshkar's voice.
Absolutely.
God
The
sake.
control and subtlety of it is alluring.
And
Yeah.
and she sold it to generations of Indian males, including myself.
Now,
So
this is. I'd like to sort of step back to get your view on the sort of big picture things of this stuff, because here we are
yeah,
talking about little minutiae of, let's say, Trinidad, of Indian films, and you're in Britain, and and you started out with these uh, immigrant radical groups in the Black
yes,
Panther Party, the Indian Workers Association, and
yep,
right now we're at a moment in history about nationalism, debates between nationalism, globalism, multiculturalism, And so there are all these questions here, and your life has touched on so many important parts of this, and to try to fit it in as a whole. Like for instance, I mean, your Naipaul's politics and your politics have, are, I suppose, opposite on the surface of it. Well, how would you reconcile that?
We never talked politics, right?
Mm-hmm.
His friends were all mostly, apart from Harold Pinter, his friends were all Tories, right?
Yes.
And they used to talk Tory, and they supported extreme Tory views.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to hang around his house a lot. And whenever I met them, I'd greet them as comrade,
Right.
just to tease them.
Yes.
I'd say, Comrade David, how are you? What?
He must have loved that.
It was mischief. It was Trinidadian mischief,
Exactly.
To call an arch-conservative, just addressing his comrade through the conversation.
Exactly.
But, so yes, there were arguments with his friends, but he would never venture into a political argument.
Right.
But after the election, he says, so did you get to the ballot box? Yes, I did. I voted Conservative, as you would expect. Yeah, and I said, yes, I can expect that, even though they're fascist dogs. And he would just laugh.
Exactly. So,
I'll tell you a story, right?
Yes.
I was in Australia researching a film there, and I was asleep in my room in Brisbane. At 2 o'clock in the morning, the bloody phone rings, and Nadira comes on, Lady Naipaul, and says, Farrukh, where are you? I said, you know exactly where I am because you phoned me in my hotel in Brisbane. She said, yes, I got your phone number off that. You disappeared. Why did you go? I said, look, I've got work here. Said, the boss wants to speak to you. I said, okay, put him on. So he says, Farrukh, I'm very sorry to call you. I know you're asleep. I'm so sorry, but I had to talk to you. I said, why? He said, because Patrick French, he sent us the manuscript of the book on myself. And he tells lies, He tells lies in it.
Oh, really? He said that?
Yeah. He said, I said, like what? He said, I beat Margaret, I beat Margaret, my friend, my girlfriend. Yeah. I beat her. And he also says, I buggered her. I don't do that, I don't do that.
Oh, wow.
I said, wow. And he's written that. He said, I can't do anything about it, you see, because I signed a paper saying he has freedom to write what he wants. And he's written this. So I said, but hang on. Patrick was a friend of ours. Why has he done this? Why has he betrayed us? A long silence. Wow. And then over the phone, he says, Farrukh, you don't realize how deep socialism has gone.
Oh, wow.
And I don't understand what he meant by that.
but
I've never understood it. But later on, when we were sitting in his house, say, and he said, these bloody gardeners, the monkeys, they're not working well. Why is he doing that? Why is he cutting it that way? And I'd say, Vidya, you don't realize how deep socialism has gone.
I think I'm going to have to start to use that myself.
It's good, isn't it?
It is. But I wonder, Patrick was a candidate for the Green Party. Did you know that?
Patrick?
Yes,
French. I didn't know that.
Yes, in I think the early 90s. I wonder if that's what Naipaul was referring to.
No, I don't understand. He lives. I know Patrick well. He's a friend of mine, and he lives in India nowadays.
Yes. Yeah.
So, and we talk. One day when I was out of sorts with Lady Nadira, she'd fought with me for something or the other, some statement or this or that, and met temporarily. But I was at an Indian High Commission party, and suddenly I feel this hug from the back. I've got a drink in one hand, and I turned around, it's Patrick French. And he said, "Welcome to the Freemasonry of the damned."
Yes, I mean, I met him in Trinidad, and
You did?
spoke to him. Yes, and I keep in touch with him, and I've spoken to him
Okay.
when he was writing the book and so forth. Yeah. So
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
did you ever speak to Patrick about that? About Naipaul saying that
About writing that? No. He knows not to tackle me on that because
yeah.
I didn't want to get started on saying, you interviewed Margaret but didn't check it. And I don't know, if Patrick says that, I don't know what his source was. I
Yeah.
gathered it was Margaret, but
Mm-hmm.
that was that. So,
Wow.
but
That's an exclusive I got here, I think, isn't it? Have you ever
there you
told
go.
anybody that story?
I've repeated it to friends, but I don't
Yes,
think I've told it to any
I don't
media.
think I've ever read that or heard that, and I'm obsessive about these things. So
So
that's
I
a
haven't read Patrick's book. It says so.
yeah, yes. I mean, yeah.
It says that, but you didn't know how
I know. I didn't know that
reacted.
Vidya had objected. Had
He
objected.
said it's lies.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether it is lies or not, but there
Right,
you go.
because she basically never gave a comment publicly on the book, right?
I don't
Naipaul
know.
himself.
Mm.
So, right, so the fact that he had this negative reaction is, I thought he was just stoic about it all, but it disturbed him, what you're saying,
He
which
didn't
is
do anything about it. He didn't do anything about it.
that's correct.
He never reacted to criticism.
Mm-hmm.
Vidya always said, I don't know what they write. I don't want to know.
Mm-hmm.
He writes his books.
That's right.
He doesn't care what people say about them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So
I mean that whole attitude I've always
he genuinely didn't care.
yes, exactly. And as you have said yourself, it's this commitment to truth, and the reactions are peripheral. It's once you're getting to the truth.
Yeah, I've been asked to write things about Vidya, and apart from the personal anecdotes, of which there are hundreds, somebody should do a proper appreciation of where he stood in world literature.
Yes.
And I could do it, somebody else could do it, Let's see.
Yes. Now now so this is important too, because you all had very different politics and were able to maintain your friendship, and of
Absolutely.
course this is not uncommon in human history, but certainly in the present moment, in this time of Trump.
Yeah.
And everybody being so, Trump breaking families and Trump breaking friendships and all this sort of thing. We're at a very, very curious moment, I think. I mean, you've been around and seen much more than I have in terms of length of time and breadth, and but I just think this is an utterly unique moment in terms of it in terms of the whole sort of political passions and the divisions and the sort of political correctness and making people lose jobs for something they tweeted 10 years ago and all this sort of thing. What's your view on this from your perspective there? Like where we are politically and with all these cultural issues in the world?
Well, I would say that what has happened in the last few decades is an internationalization of labor and capital. And you can't have one without the other.
Mm-hmm.
Capital moves from place to place. China gets richer. India gets a huge capitalist enterprise, though not a huge capitalist class.
Mm-hmm.
It's a small number of people owning a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And using it badly. India, parts of it get huge chunks of it get poorer and poorer, parts of it get richer and richer. And then you have, in that globalization, you have people in complete turmoil.
Yeah.
Like the Middle East. They don't know who's going to dominate what. In the Middle East, Trump becomes an anti-globalist.
Yes.
Insofar as he tries to, prevent people selling goods there. He wants capital to come back to, from South Korea to America, which it won't do, because capital goes where labor is cheap and trained, And
What do you think Vidya would have thought of Trump?
What do I think of Trump?
Yeah. What do you think Vidya would have thought of Trump? VS Naipaul.
He would have thought he's a very vulgar person.
Yes.
A person with no count for him.
Yes.
You know?
But I think he would have been highly amused. I think he would have been highly amused.
Well, he would have been entertained by
Yes.
this rubbish that Trump talks about, grabbing pussy and so forth. He would have said, "That's dreadful, you know. That's dreadful," and then he'd laugh.
Exactly.
Because
I think he would appreciate that Trump is pissing off all the right people.
He did, but he wouldn't have liked it. He wouldn't have liked it. But he didn't like vulgarity.
Yes.
And Trump is nothing but vulgar. You know, he's not. But it's an anti-globalization movement that we're getting in Brexit, in the Trump movement. You know, what does Trump trade on? He says to the workers, to the blue collars, we'll bring back capital to Detroit. You know, we'll stop Mexicans coming over the wall.
So now,
Muslims. You know, we're going to pull troops out of Syria. What he's saying is, we want a small America again, and we'll be as prosperous as we were. Of course, he's fooling people, because capital will never come back to America.
In terms of your politics, would you consider, and you know, because it ties in with your artistic work as well, because you are working in a global environment. Would you consider yourself a sort of pro-globalization advocate, or
as a Marxist, I would say, as a, let's say, theoretical Marxist, not a Stalinist or a practical activist, I would say that it's inevitable that globalization will happen. You know, one capitalist swallows another, which is a Lenin statement, and it will go all the way. You know, we will soon have capital owning all the world, and that will be, as CLR James said, the stepping stone to socialism.
Right.
He would astound people by saying that the country that's closest to socialism, as Marx described it, is the United States of America.
Right, which is his argument in what is it, the 1950s book, what was it, American, the one that wasn't published, that Keith Hart put out in the 80s. What was it called? American. I can't remember the title. It escaped me. But it's about America, and yeah, he made that argument since the 50s that America is closest to the socialist and Marxist idea. Yeah.
Well, of course, America doesn't believe it's socialist at all. But in the rights that it has won for its citizens, in the advance of its democracy and its institutions, in the fact that you have a rule of law that moves through richness, through enhancing the lives of workers, it's more Marxist than China or Lenin's peasant state, which he thought could be socialism. Marx didn't say that. Marx didn't say you could take a 90% peasant country and convert it into socialism.
Absolutely.
There's no way you could do that.
It's like the Bill Warren thesis and so forth, that capitalism must be there first before and socialism.
That's what
pure Marx. It's pure Marx.
That's what Karl himself said. Yes.
Exactly, and that socialism is a necessarily global thing, and you could never have it in one country.
It will move towards that, and then slowly. I mean, there's no ideal like that. Nothing will happen according to the script, but something of that sort is bound to happen, because putting philosophy, economics, and history together, that's the conclusion that we have to come to.
So in terms, so now, given that you've been able to successfully work in let's say two different national traditions, right? I think the Indian and the British, right? So Mangal Pandey, you're able to work in that epic Bollywood thing, and you're also able to work in the British thing as well. So you're easily navigating these things. But So what is your view on the importance of let's say national cultures then in this regard? Because a lot of this anti-globalization has to do with defending one's national cultural traditions and not letting them go. And what's your view on that debate?
I think that's perfectly okay, right? I would not like to see, the pasta of Italy disappearing because Moroccans live there. I would not like to see fish and chips going off the menu just because we've got tandoori chicken as well. But the as well is probably the best thing to do. I don't believe in encouraging every multicultural tray of everything. I don't think Britain is ever going to accept the fact that a man can have 4 wives legally. I don't think the feminists will stand for that. I don't think any women will stand for that.
Right.
So, so multiculturalism will not extend to the Muslims bringing, yes, they bring kebabs, great. They can wear what caps they like. I don't care what hoods they wear, as long as it doesn't impede on public duties. I don't believe that you should cover your face if you're in court. I don't believe that you should cover your face completely when you're raiding a bank. Those traditions have to go.
And I suppose this is where the debate comes in. Where do we draw the line? Because
eating kebabs, doing where you like, wearing what you like, that's absolutely fine. I mean, who's going to object to that, right?
Yeah,
yes, cultures are important and they should be preserved, but they can live side by side. There is absolutely no rule which says one culture should exclude another. Yeah?
Because I think that the histories of the Parsis, for example, are interesting and illustrative of that, because when the Muslims went into Persia and then the Zoroastrians went to India, and so Zoroastrianism survives not so much in its homeland, but in India, and has stayed there. Your community has been there, 1,000 years or so, has it?
I suppose about 641 was the invasion of Persia by the Arabs. And after that, it lasted maybe 40, 50 years. Yeah. And so by the 8th century, 700 something.
Because that's about 1,400 years, I suppose. So 30. And you've remained a distinct community.
Yes, a distinct community because there were 2 things. One, the person who welcomed the Parsis into India, said that he was afraid of the Muslims, said you mustn't try and convert the Hindus to your religion. So the Parsis kind of stuck together. And they generated a sort of racism because they said, look, we are fairer skinned than the people we've come to live with. And we'll stay that way. Be genetically pure, this and the other. I don't think there is any such thing as Parsi genetic purity. I'm sure that they mixed with the Indian populations.
But I've considered that I think India has a curious sort of liberalism. It's its own type of liberalism where you have Jewish communities, Parsi communities, Muslim communities. So everybody is there, and they're able to stay there for over 1,000 years, maintain their identities and ethnic differences, and have a relative peacefulness. Of course, there are tensions every once in a while, but comparatively in global history, I think
the smaller minorities are left alone, right? Yes. The larger minorities have struggled with each other, Hindus and Muslims, because there were Muslim conquest of the Hindus.
That's right. I don't think it has to do with size. I think it has to do with the history of.
But Parsis, Jews, Christians, by and large, are left alone.
Yeah.
Sikhs were attacked when they tried to break away from India.
Yes. Yes. But
when they started the Khalistani movement, and then Indira Gandhi moved into the Golden Temple with the armies, and then her security guards were Sikhs killed her, and then there was a pogrom against the Sikhs, and so on. So there have been that sort of minor fracas, but well, historically minor, absolutely tragic in its
Yes,
personal consequences for
absolutely.
people. But minor costs. But
Because
between Hindus and Muslims, there's always been a tension.
but the thing is, I think that there's what I've called Indian liberalism, which is very different from a Western liberalism. In that, I mean,
I'm sure you're right.
yeah,
There's
because
been a lot of love between Hindus and Muslims also. And even the so-called worst emperor of the Mughal Empire, Aurangzeb, I mean,
yes,
he employed Hindu ministers and generals.
yes,
Those,
and just like in Hinduism, no no matter thieves have their own gods, and prostitutes have their gods, and hermaphrodites have their it's like there's a place for everything. You just sort of have to know your place, and you fit in, and it doesn't necessarily mean everything mixes, but everything is allowed their place, and that's sort of like the Indian liberalism. So everything can exist.
that's
Yeah,
quite true. The one part of the Indian system that should change and is bound to change is casteism. We
yeah,
don't really want to,
right.
do untouchability, all this stuff. That's rubbish.
But in terms of
It persists.
the future of globalization, there,
Yeah.
there can be, okay, if one were to accept that it's inevitable, and I'm not sure we should accept that it's inevitable, but let's say it's inevitable. There are still different models on how different human cultures should coexist. There's one thing that everything should be sort of blended into one big, huge global culture. And then there's this other model where you have your cultural autonomy that exists, and there are boundaries, and there are different traditions kept everywhere. What's your sort of view on that?
I think multiplicity, let a million flowers bloom and stay together. The roses are not pushing out the dandelions. Uh, they can live together
Yeah,
and they can both be beautiful.
great. So I mean, I appreciate your time. We went a little over what I had planned, and it's been great. But just tell me, so I understand the Bikini Murders is being made into a film. Is that correct? Your
I
book?
don't know yet whether the Bikini Murders will be made into film, but there are so many stories to tell about Charles Sobraj, who is the character that I used to base Bikini Murders on. He's a serial killer. He's at present in jail in Kathmandu for life. He'll never get out.
Right.
But one of those things, there are so many stories to tell about Charles Sobraj. Even in my interaction, apart from his murders, even in my interaction with him, because he came to me in '97,
Mm-hmm.
and since then has formed an acquaintance with
He
me.
came to
I've
you.
explored the story. He came to me. I was in
How
Channel
did that
4.
happen? Oh, you were in Channel 4.
I'm sitting in Channel 4 in my office when my secretary says to me, Dolly, which is what she used to call me, Dolly Daydreams, because I was caught sleeping under the tables one day. And she says, a fella called Charles Sobraj has rung 10 times, and I've always pushed him off. Shall I put him through? I said, Charles Sobraj, my God, just put him through. And I hear this voice at the end of the phone, Mr. Dhondy, you might have heard of me. My name is Charles Sobraj. I said, you're the serial killer. He said, you could put it that way. So I said, what do you want?
Caught?
But no, he was out of jail and he was in Paris.
Wow.
Because Indians had made, India had made a deal with Paris once he got released from jail after serving 22 years there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, anyway, read Bikini Murders.
Yes.
Right? All that story is told there.
Right.
So, otherwise, I can't tell the whole story
Yes,
in the novel.
Exactly. Yes. Oh, that's great. So that may be going into a film. Yes.
Well, it may not be the Bikini Murders. It may be, or it may be another series I'm writing on Charles Sobraj.
Right.
Using his name. I didn't use his name in the Bikini Murders, but if I write a Sobraj story, I'll tell from Bikini Murders because it'll be more factual.
So it's an idea that some film version of these stories are
It has been bought. Yeah.
Oh, it's been bought.
It has been bought.
Oh, great,
already.
Great. So do you have a time when this is going to be coming out? A time frame that you're working?
Probably next year. Probably
it'll
be written early next year and shot and come by the end of the year.
Will it be a British production, an American, or what?
Indian production, probably, maybe American sales, I don't know.
Oh, so will this be a Bollywood film?
No. The production company will work from the United States, so they might try and sell it to Netflix or Amazon or somebody. Which is good.
And you're working on this Indian Netflix, this Indian version of Netflix.
I'm working on a different platform on Indian Netflix. I can't write for myself, of course. That would be a conflict of interest.
Right.
But I'm commissioning the programs that go onto it.
Very good. That's
I'm
excellent.
helping commission.
And anything else you're working on in the next year, 5 years, or whatever that you're...
Oh, the webcam business has gone wild, web series. And lots of people are touting for films and web series and drama, this and that. I think the next year or so, at least, will be absorbed in writing those, getting them off, seeing how they work, getting them produced, Well, so that's basically it.
That's excellent.
No retirement for the wicked. Yes.
Yes. I mean, you are quite active. I mean, you remain so. I look forward to seeing these things come about, and I'm so glad to have this conversation. It was great.
Good.
I can go on forever, and I'm going to let you go. I'm going to have to restrain myself.
Thanks, my dear. Okay, cheers.
Okay, bye. Thanks. Bye.
Happy New Year.
To you too. Bye.